The 2025 Super Bowl already feels like a distant memory. Yes, the Seattle Seahawks astoundingly beat the New England Patriots, and yes, Sam Darnold completed his redemption story, but who cares? Trades are being made, drafts are being planned, and every fan is wondering whether the next Vincent Lombardi trophy will be theirs. But which team will be dousing their head coach in Gatorade and making a last-minute trip to Disneyland? Will it be yet another trophy for a dynasty, or will it be a new franchise altogether? Or maybe, just maybe, it will be the Miami Dolphins. Yeah, okay, we'll be serious. Join us at Across the Gridiron, where Eddie picks his top 5 teams who could win the Super Bowl in the next 5 years.
I'm the bad guy. I'm the
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Across the Gridiron. I am Matt, and I am joined once again by my friend and yours, Eddie Equo, as we kick off this off-season with our first top 5 video. Now, what we're doing in this video, we are picking, when I say we, Eddie is picking his top 5 teams who he thinks could win the Super Bowl within the next 5 years. So Eddie's going to give us his pick. I will give some, persuasive arguments, and we'll see sort of where we land. But before we do all of that, Eddie, it's been a few weeks now without football. How are you feeling? How are you coping? And are we ready for this off-season?
Yeah, I feel better now. I feel better that we're talking football. It's been a bit of a stretch. We had to go re-energize and come back even stronger. And listen, guys, you're not going to want to miss this list, because there's going to be a few teams there that are going to surprise and maybe upset a few fans. So we want to know what your reaction is. But I'm going to put my reputation on the line, for this one, and we're going to have some fun. 5 teams who we believe are going to win the Super Bowl in the next 5 years. So stick around for it.
But may I say, Eddie, that you talk about you putting your reputation on the line. Anyone who saw your predictions last year, this isn't a really good reputation that you've got to put on the line here. It's kind of, you put your reputation on the line as a bad predictor. So you could get them all right and you've lost all your credibility.
Well, I don't know what that's got to do with anything. This is a brand new year. We're looking forward. No one looks to the back. Who remembers the team that played in the Super Bowl that lost? You see, nobody. Everyone remembers the Super Bowl winner. So we're going to look forward.
So this is the first list with a new year, new me attitude from Eddie Equo. So, all right, look, let's go into it. First of all, let's start with your number 5.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the one that's a little bit obvious, right? Because I think everyone, above us will pencil these guys in, to be in the Super Bowl. And that's the team that, have got, the championship like a subscription, like a bit like your Netflix subscription. They're literally, always there. They know how to get there. They paid the money to get into the championship. And that is the Kansas City Chiefs. For me, I think that when you look at, Andy Reid and you look at Patrick Mahomes, you don't need anybody else, really. But of course, football is played with a lot more than just 2 people. And actually, of those 2, only one actually plays. But you have to look at the pedigree of Andy Reid and what he's been able to do with that franchise. And of course, they had a down year, last year, which can happen, to lots of teams. You have aging players, you've got to cycle them out. But, I look at what they've done, in the off season, and, in terms of how they are retooling the stock, you can tell that it hurt them not to be in the Super Bowl. So for me, I think you got to bet on the Kansas City Chiefs. I think it is a sure bet money. They've just restructured Mahomes' contract, so save a little bit of money. And that's always, kind of good, a signal of intent. It kind of tells you, okay, we restructure the money so we can get, additional pieces to help them. So, and again, you kind of look at the division that they're in, it tells you that they will be there. So for me, Kansas City Chiefs, number 5 in terms of getting to the Super Bowl and winning it in the next 5 years.
Okay, I think that seems to be a pretty down the middle number 5. Just want to come back to you on a couple of things though. Do you think are you just sort of defaulting to the Chiefs purely because of history? because you said that, you've got Mahomes, you've got Reed. That's all you need. That's all that didn't work last year, right? And so let's be honest. And there is a turnover of this sort of supporting cast on a year by year basis. Really, it feels like Tyreek Hill was a big part. Then he left, and it's, can we just default to the Chiefs every single year? And let's be honest, the AFC is stronger now, right?
Yeah.
We've talked about the Broncos. The Pats did so well. Those two teams did really well last season. You've still got the Steelers. You've got the Bills. You've got lots of things. Are they really the surefire sort of domination dynasty that they were a few years ago?
Well, I mean, if you think about the Patriots, right? Remember that Tom Brady had like a 10-year hiatus before he got back into the Super Bowl. And I don't think the Chiefs have been in that situation, right? They're only like one season removed from being in the playoffs and going very far from being in the Super Bowl. So I think that they still have the required structured system. They're a team that knows how to win. And I think for me, I know it seems very simple and it almost feels like you're defaulting to when you think about Andy Reid and think about Patrick Mahomes. But he is one of the best quarterbacks. And I know that people might start to make arguments about who really is the best, but I don't think you can list 3 quarterbacks without calling Patrick Mahomes, right? And so when you think about that, and then you also think about what they've done strategically. Now, Mahomes' cap space is going to jump up in 2027, so that is something that they're probably thinking about. So you expect Travis Kelce to move on, at some point. But the Chiefs also know how to draft. They tend to draft well as well. So, I think that, they've got the base there. They've got a defense that they've paid money. They've got a couple of players that they've paid money, who are still going to be there. And you know what they say about defenses winning championships. So I think that when you have an elite quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, I think it does paper over some cracks, that they have. So you've got to put them in.
They're absolutely in the mix. I agree. And if I was to rate your pick, I'd probably give it a good sort of like 6 or 7. Look, they have a fantastic quarterback. They have a fantastic coach. They've been there. They've done it. They had a bit of a dip last season. Do I think they're a surefire guarantee to make the playoffs? Well, no, they're not. But we know that having a solid quarterback and a great coach is half the battle. But we have seen plenty of teams have a great quarterback and not make it to the playoffs and not do anything in the playoffs. Something that quite well, Eddie. As a baseball cap suggests.
I don't know why we're dragging teams that are not even in the conversation into this. What have we got to do with this? We're talking about Super Bowl champions here.
I know, exactly. We're talking about Super Bowl champions. We should not be talking about the Dallas Cowboys. Okay. Right, so let's move on to pick 4.
Okay, so this one is probably going to be a little bit surprising, right? Because I think, people jumped on the bandwagon a little bit early, with this team. And then I think I've seen a few people jump off the bandwagon. Some people haven't even waited for the bandwagon to slow down. They've been jumping up and people have bruised knees and all of that. But for me, this is a team that, and the reason why I'm picking this team is because I've looked at, the team structure, and they've got a quarterback on a rookie deal, right? He's still on a rookie deal, which is crazy because I was thinking about it. I was like, is he still on a rookie deal? And this is the Texans, the Houston Texans, CJ Stroud. He came into the league and so much promise, so much talent. And we thought this was it. The Texans were going to take off. And they've had a couple of, stumbling seasons, partially due to injury and all of that. But I think last, year, we started seeing, them beginning to put something together. And they had a good defense. They had a top 5 defense, last season. And I think that DeMeco Ryan, is a really good coach. when you kind of look at how he's brought things together. And I think the biggest thing for me is the fact that CJ Stroud is still on his rookie deal. I think there's so much that you can do when you have a good quarterback on a rookie deal where you can stock up, in areas. And I think they just need a couple of pieces. I'm talking about in the offense, need a couple of pieces there. And they've got some high picks as well in this next draft. So I would say that, they add a couple of pieces in the draft pick, maybe get a tight end, maybe add another, wide receiver, and another running back. Maybe they can do something to their O-line. I think their O-line wasn't, all the best, but it wasn't the worst out there, so they can incrementally increase and be better. So I think the Texans, for me, have, and again, they play in the AFC, so which is an interesting, conference to be in right now. There's a lot of young quarterbacks, in the AFC right now. So, and you can almost look at CJ Stroud almost as a veteran, even though he's technically still new to the league. So Texans for me are my next one. They're number 4 on the list.
Yeah, I can see that. I think what I like about your pick is that everyone's always said before that it's the defense wins championships, right?
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that the Houston Texans had last season. They had an absolutely dominant defense. Just came up short against the Patriots in the end, but an absolute dominant defense. The one thing that let them down, you said he's on a rookie deal, and you're absolutely right, and he's got potential. You're absolutely right. But CJ Stroud struggled throughout last season. Is he really a Super Bowl winning quarterback? But then again, people might have said the same about Sam Darnold, and I know you definitely said it about Jalen Hurts. So it's not always the best quarterback goes ahead and wins a Super Bowl. The one concern I would have is, do we think that they are probably still a little bit too early in their sort of development cycle, and are we relying too much here on potential trajectory, easy for me to say, rather than actually proof? Are you really are you looking at these guys purely on potential rather than where they are right now?
So, I mean, it's not purely on potential and projection. I mean, the proof, clearly they haven't gone very far, right? They've come out of the playoffs around about the same time, every single season. But I feel like there is something that does to an organization in terms of, kind of tweaking things. But also, I give you the Seahawks, right? I don't think that anybody, would have looked at the Seahawks and said, show me the proof that you're going to get to the Super Bowl and you're going to win it. So I think they've got that going for them. But I just like the fact that they've got a couple of draft picks now. Of course, you can hit with draft picks, you can bomb with them. But if they hit with the draft picks, the defense that they have, as well, I think that in the next 5 years, they can win one. Because I think the quarterback is good. He's good enough. And I think the Seahawks have shown you that if you have complementary pieces, you don't need an elite quarterback. You could argue that the Eagles have showed you that, or people say that.
I know, I knew. I thought I'd get that one in before you did. But look, in seriousness, I do like the pick. They started badly last season, the Texans, but then they went on an unbelievable run of form. I think for them in the AFC, I think a big thing for them will be their schedule, right? And who they come up against in a given season. But no, I like the pick. I think Stroud has to be better than last season. But as you were just trying to say before you took a dig at the Eagles, that it's not always the quarterback that makes a difference. So no, I think solid choice. I'd have to agree with that one.
Yeah.
So let's move on to pick 3. Who have you got for us?
Okay, so this team is a team that I don't like, right? It's a team that I've had a few skirmishes with in the past. It's a team that has whooped our tail, more times than not. But I've got to be fair, right? I can't let my bias, get involved in, being objective. And we're talking about teams that can win something in the next 5 years. And this team have got proof. They've got proof, as well. And that is the San Francisco 49ers. And I know that people may have thought, oh, I'm going to put the Eagles in. No, it's the San Francisco 49ers.
Anybody who watches this podcast will know you are not putting the Philadelphia Eagles into this. Don't you worry.
But I think, here are the reasons why, right? So you've got Brock Purdy, and no matter what people say about him, right? He's a quarterback that has won in the playoffs. He's gotten to a Super Bowl, and granted, he didn't win it, but he got there. And they've locked him up. They've extended him. It's a lot of money, but his cap hit is only about 24 million. So they've got heavy money tied to stars. I give you that. But they've got depth. Last season they were beginning to come out of a period of injury. If you look at the season before last, they really, really struggled with a lot of injuries. Last season, they got a little bit healthier. But for me, it's Shanahan. Shanahan is the key to all of this. And he has shown that if he has a competent quarterback, he can get 12 wins in a season. You've seen him do it with Brock Purdy. You've seen him do it with Jimmy Garoppolo. If he has a competent quarterback and health is favoring the team, he gets them in the playoffs. And then when you get into the playoffs, for me, I feel like the 49ers, don't need to be at Mahomes level. But I think in the next 5 years, you've got to add them in. They're a team that have been to the championships a lot of time, been to the Super Bowl as well. So that is your proof. And eventually, when you knock on that door, at some point the door's going to open. So, and listen, they're gonna retool. I see them making moves in the offseason too, as well. They play in a tough division, and sometimes playing in a tough division means that there's no days off, right? You don't take any game off because that if you slip off, you might not make it. So I think that division that they're in actually works in their favor. Means that they're not taking things lightly, being complacent. They just go about and do their business. And for me, you got to put the 49ers in there.
I see where you're coming from, and I think there could be an argument that San Fran could potentially be one of the best teams, or one of the best current teams, never to win it, right? You say sometimes you eventually knock on the door, it will eventually open, but sometimes you keep knocking on the door and realize that it's locked, right? I'd be a little bit concerned about the 49ers. I do get what you're referring to, yep. But they just seem to be a team that they can get close, but just cannot get over the line. And there is a question about the exact opposite. If we were talking about the Texans are a young, exciting team, but are they aging in sort of the wrong areas, or some of the core areas? So there is the argument that this window for them, this Super Bowl window, might be closing on this set of players. Is Purdy good enough to get them over that line, or does he have a ceiling? Again, I'm just asking these questions. I'm not necessarily saying that I believe it per se, because everyone's asking the same about Sam Darnold last year, and he shattered that glass ceiling that he put that was apparently on him. So I would just have some concerns around that. I think they're also I also understand where you're coming from about their division, but the problem is they've got 4 really tough games in their division, right? And last season we had 3 teams going through from the same division. That's not going to happen every year, is it? So one of those 3 are likely to slip away and might not even make the playoffs next season, because got 4 very, very tough games. I know it means you can't be complacent, but at the same time, there's only so many hits a body can take, right? So I would, again, I don't know why I've started doing this, but if I was to rank your Rank your choice. I would go sort of maybe 50-50 on this one. But what do you think about the aging side of their side?
I mean, it's a fair point. It's a fair point. It's a fair point to look about the age. But I'm betting on the coaching and the system that they have in place. And, I was looking at the 49ers in terms of their success rate in the draft, and they do very well. 55% of people that they draft become starters. So that gives you confidence in the scouting system, in what they've got there. So I think that system for me sometimes is more important than individual players. You've got to have the right system, and Shanahan has proven that he's got the right system because he can plug and play, certain players, and it always seems to produce results. Health, giving. So I think they're a classic textbook team that know how to put all the ingredients together, but sometimes you need an element of luck. Whether that luck is in injury, luck in maybe schedule, maybe luck in just timing of things. And I think they've not had the luck, but I think they've had the structure. So for me, I think they're a fair shot. And yes, you can kind of look at some of the downsides of it. But yeah, I think I have confidence in them when I look at them compared to others.
Okay, so let's look at your number 2.
Right. So this next team is a team that is going to surprise a lot of people because you kind of look at the team and they haven't really been good in the last couple of years. And you keep scratching your head and wondering, why? Because they've got all the elements. They've got quarterbacks, they've got weapons. You're kind of thinking, what is stopping them? And really, they are now in this window of 5 years where they've got to do it. If not, I think that this would be one of the biggest failures of every franchise. I'm putting pressure on them because it's not the Dallas Cowboys. The Cincinnati Bengals. This is a team for me that I look at them and you keep asking the question, why are they not in the playoffs? They've got Joe Burrow. They've got Jamar Chase. They've got T. Higgins. They've got weapons, right? And you keep wondering, what does it need or what does it take, to get them there? And I see what they're doing in the offseason. They've been restructuring. They let Hendrickson go. So I think they're trying to create cap space to help them. Clearly, they need a lot of, O-line depth, as well. So I think that the draft is going to be important for them. But I think they're now on the hot seat. They're now in there. And I think that in 5 years, they might need to change the coach, in order to make this happen. But I see a team that, has got an elite quarterback. That's what everybody keeps telling me. I know his cap hit is a bit high and all of that, but they can restructure, how they manipulate the numbers, restructure the quarterback, restructure the wide receiver so they can get space, to go bring other weapons in. So the Cincinnati Bengals for me, number 2 on my list.
I think it's a number 2 in terms of, as you were saying before, that this window is closing on the Bengals, right? Yeah. They do have an elite quarterback, but I have major concerns because you took that elite quarterback out of that team last year and it all went to pot. It all went to pot. And we talked about this when we talked about your number 5 pick in Kansas City, that you can't rely purely on a single player to get you there. We talked about how good Mahomes was and all that kind of stuff. So can you rely too much on Burrows to get them over the line? And especially when it comes to injury, they have a history of injuries to key players. That is a big concern to me, that the O-line has been a recurring issue that's led to injuries such as Burrows. And they just haven't, in my opinion, they haven't consistently delivered in the big moments. That really makes me think, yes, this is a team. So I would almost frame this. I don't believe they are a team that can in the next 5 years. I generally don't believe they can. They can certainly. I think they can get far in the playoffs. They might get to a championship game, but I would certainly put them in the top 5 of teams who have the highest pressure because of this window that is closing, especially with Boroughs. So, look, the questions I would ask you, I guess, is: can they protect Boroughs when it matters the most? You know, how many chances do we give them before we completely question everything that they're doing? And is this a team that's purely just going to be a nearly men, rather than being a team who actually take it to that next level?
Yeah, I mean, they're a high variance team, right? If everything is there, if everyone is healthy, they are a Super Bowl contending team. Now, of course, health is something that you cannot predict. So it is a bit of a risky pick, for me. But I needed to, when I was looking at, this and I was kind of thinking about it, I was like, well, everything is about a risk in the NFL, right? To an extent, you never know what's going to happen in week 1. Right, you get on the field week 1, someone goes down, and that could completely change the trajectory of your season. But you always have to think, okay, if everyone is healthy, is this a team that can put it together? And I think you can go with what they're trying to do there. And listen, they've got to fix their defense. And I am convinced that, in this draft, they're going to be looking to fix that defense, especially, not wanting to pay the likes of Hendrickson, and letting some players go. I think that they're going to address that in the draft. And hopefully, some of those players, become starters. But yeah, they're a risky pick for sure. But I think the Cincinnati Bengals are definitely a team in the next 5 years to win the Super Bowl.
And we know you love a risky pick. So look, before we get to number 1 pick then, Eddie, I thought I'd just throw out some honourable mentions who, if I was doing this list, who some of the names that I would be putting on there. I think I'd be putting, obviously, the Buffalo Bills, someone we talked about loads last year. And you talk about the Bengals having a smaller window to make the most of an elite quarterback. I mean, Christ, Josh Allen has to get there at some point. It would be absolute criminal if that guy doesn't make or win a Super Bowl. So I'd be looking at those guys. I would also be, if we wanted a team who are on the right trajectory, doing really well at the moment, young players and growing, and the improvements they made last season, I'd be certainly looking at Chicago Bears. I thought the Chicago Bears last season were superb at times. And with Caleb Williams at quarterback, that is a young quarterback who I think can carry a team to a Super Bowl. So they would be quite high up on my list. I would have said the Philadelphia Eagles just to annoy you, just to kind of rub it in. And then maybe a similar one, Texans, who I may put on there just because they had a good season last year, would have been the Jacksonville Jaguars. So they're sort of my honorable mentions. Do you want to throw anything back at me on those before we give you a number 1?
I see your mentions, and I raise, the fact that, listen, the Bills are in a bit of a disarray right now. They've just sacked their coach, they're getting a new coach there. We don't even know what's going to happen there. They've got a lot of reconstruction to do, I would say. So the Bills, that's why I didn't put them in this list, because there wasn't really, other than their quarterback, I didn't feel like there was enough to anchor them on. But, I see about the Bears. I mean, the Bears, we need to give them time. We need to see them. They've been awful up until last season.
We're talking about 5 years here, Eddie, aren't we? We're the next 5 years.
5 years. And listen, there are promise about the quarterback. Caleb Williams has shown that he can deal. But yeah, I still feel like there's quite a few things there. The coaching has elevated certain things. Now, teams tend to come back down to the mean, after having an explosive year. So that's why, I don't. I mean, the Eagles, yeah, whatever.
I won't let you debate that one. I'll let you debate that one.
But I mean, to be fair, they're honorable mentions. I would say, yeah.
Hey, it's your list, Eddie. I'm just wanted to give my feedback of where I would go. So, right.
So
without further ado, let's get to Eddie's number one pick.
So number one is a team that plays in blue most of the time. They also played a bit of blue on white, as well. Also in the NFC, and it's a team that last year there were questions about, okay, what the heck happened, to them. And this is a team that used to blow teams out for fun. They love the 40 points. When they're playing teams. And for me, that's the Detroit Lions. Number one for me. I think in the next 5 years, I can see them winning the Super Bowl. And listen, Jared Goff is not Patrick Mahomes, but he's a quarterback that has been to the Super Bowl before, right? With the Rams. Didn't make it. But I think that they've got weapons. Jamel Gibbs, Laporta, an absolute stud there. And there was a reset, obviously, when they lost Ben Johnson last year. It was a bit of a reset. And, they needed to figure things out. And maybe they figured things out, too late, to be able to establish a rhythm. But I think Dan Campbell has brought in a structure that allows these players to play hard, play honest, and almost elevate themselves. You can't look at the Detroit Lions and think when they step against another opposition that they feel inferior. They've shown that they can beat, elite teams. They can show that they can pummel teams that are not very good. So anyone playing the Lions know that they're in for a really, really good game. And also their draft, they do well. They hit 60% of the time when they draft players. So you kind of look at all of that in the mix. And for me, I think they're up there. They're my number one in terms of, teams that can win the Super Bowl in the next 5 years.
Well, I would certainly have these guys in my top five too, without question. I've got a couple of concerns with them. Again, are we getting? Is this their window right now? We're not talking about the next 5 years with these guys. With this team, we're talking about the next 1 year, 2 years, right? Because I don't think this team has a huge doesn't have a huge road ahead of them like the Texans, like the Bears, who I mentioned, so this window might be peaking sort of right now. The defense is inconsistent, but they're also going to be in a situation where they have to start paying their offensive players soon, right? So what happens when they have to pay everybody? They can't pay everyone, right? So their team is inherently going to be weaker, and it's going to be propped up by draft players or sort of lesser free agents in the next couple of years. And it's just whether their defense is strong enough to go all the way. Right, explosive offense last season. You racked up a huge number of points the last couple of seasons, but they've just struggled on the defense. And is that enough to carry them deep in the playoffs and actually get them to the Super Bowl and actually win the Super Bowl? So they're sort of my concern with the Lions, but generally I think it's a good pick.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that. At some point, nobody can pay everyone, although you keep saying, how do the Eagles do it? Because they keep paying everyone. They have to find a way. So I think, some clever accounting, manipulation, moving numbers. I mean, they've restructured Goff, this year, so to give them a bit of cap space. So I think they're going to play the game. And don't forget, every year the cap goes up, so, at some point, you're going to let some players go. I think that's normal, but that's what the draft is for. So you bring in the draft to top up, where you've got some obvious gaps. But for me, I think this is a team that can go far. They've got the ingredients. They just need to get it done. Okay, so that's it. I know there's a few teams in there. Everyone is a bit surprised. What have you got for this pick? But honestly, genuinely, I think those teams have got the best chance of winning the Super Bowl in the next 5 years. And I know my Dallas Cowboys are not there, and it's really, really a sad thing.
You haven't put the Dolphins there either, mate. I mean, they could have been a real dark horse show.
Yeah, but let me know what you think. Do you agree with this list? Do you disagree? Put that in the comments. Let's see what you guys think. The next 5 years, who are your team? Nail it, and we'll probably track this to see how we're going, see how many of this we knock off. As we go on. But yeah, that's the pick, and guys, we'll be doing a lot more of this. So if you enjoyed this, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button as well, and share this with as many other NFL fans. Until the next one, we'll see you across the gridiron.
I'm the bad guy. I'm the